So I just said there on Tuesday that I was going to have a quick look at the starter report that I provided you with there for the exam. Now, really, there's really only one thing that I want to clarify, and maybe it doesn't even need clarification. So this is the starter repo, and the only thing I wanted to look at briefly was the data types that I have inside in the shared folder. So the context, Maria, for this is we have teams and okay, teams play matches, I guess, but I don't have a match type. I do have a team type, which we can see here. And for each, let's call this an entity type. For each entity type, I have a corresponding database type for it. You know, we could have done this in the lectures and in the labs. I didn't at the time. And it's just a more type safe approach. Given that we're using TypeScript, we need to be as type safe as possible. So, I mean, if you looked at this, and you're probably already clear on it. So here we're defining the type team, and I would kind of refer to this now as maybe an entity type. So that might be what a user kind of provides. And then within our lambdas, I guess we would convert, if we want to interact with our database, we would convert an entity type into its database equivalent. And here I'm defining the database equivalent, the database type equivalent of my entity type. And I'm using my utilities that I talked about way back. So I'm using the omit there. So I'm saying omit from team, omit the ID property, which means we're left with just name, age group, and players, and then add in these two other properties, if you like, partition key and sort key, I guess. And I'm actually stating the structure of my, if we take the partition key, I'm saying the partition key has to begin with M hash. And the way you interpret this bit here is you're saying that the rest of the key is taken from the ID property of team in terms of the type that the ID property is, which happens to be a string. You know, you could argue that this is kind of overkill. I could have just said, look, the type for PK is string, but I'm being more specific about it. And that would actually help at compile time when we're constructing uh, a PK for our DB team. If it doesn't begin with M hash, then we'll actually get a compile time error. You know, if I go over to Lambda, for example, Lambda A is using team and DB team. You know, so for example, here, if I, let's say, omit that part, you can see here, look, I'm getting a compile time error, which is kind of nice. Yeah. Just by the way, the compiler won't really pick up that the rest of the PK is a valid team ID. You know, it's not that clever. So really anything that we put in here, if I just do the following, like if I go, you know, ABC, you know, I'm not getting any compile time error because the compiler doesn't really understand that all the compiler is doing is it's checking that the part after the hash is essentially a string or a substring, if you like, because that's all it can glean from. That's all it can glean from That's all I can glean from here, really, is that the part after the M hash, its type is whatever the type of the ID property of team is, which we see up here is string. Yeah. Okay, so that's the explanation for that, really. And similarly for match incident, now you might think we should really have a team, or sorry, we should have a match type and a DB match type if we were storing matches in our database, but I didn't want to overcomplicate it. I wanted to limit it to two entity types and therefore two database item types as well. So I just went with team and match incident. And a match incident, then we can see has all of this stuff. And the primary key and sort key for a match incident, you know, it's kind of, we're saying it's constructed of, begins with, what is it, I hash. It has to have essentially a string part, then a dash. Where's my dash? Then sorry, no, let me check again. Match incidents. Oh yeah, then the dash here. Sorry, match incident, team one. Gosh, let's check it again. Team one ID, match incident, team two ID with a dash between them. So again, at compile time, it will check that there is a dash in our PK. It'll check that the PK begins with I hash. But this bit here and this bit here, all it really checks for is at compile time now, is that it's a string because match incident team one ID is, we can see up here, is a string. These two are strings. They're not strings, actually. They're of type team. They're of type team ID, which is a string from the top of the file. Yeah, so anyway, so that's, and this is kind of common practice really to have entity types and DB types. Again, as I said, I didn't do it in the lectures, but it's kind of best practice. And I don't necessarily want this to be a complicating factor for you. And that's all. And you know, if you look at the seeding data anyway, you'll get a feel for, where's my seeding data? Yeah, if you're a little bit unsure, just look at the seeding data. And that gives you kind of concrete examples of our two types, teams and match incidents. And again, you know, at compile time, it doesn't really check, for example, that if we look at match incident, the sort key for match incident is the minute within the match that the incident occurred. So that value there should really match this value here, but there's nothing in the compiler that will do that for you. And you don't necessarily need to do it you could do it at runtime, but unless I state that you have to do that. Right. That's all really. That's all I wanted to look at. The stack file itself is straightforward enough. There's nothing new in that. The lambdas, most of the lambdas are just placeholders. There's a tiny bit of code in lambda A. All right, but other than that, that's all I wanted to cover. So I'm not, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any questions. No. Okay, I will be in touch with you again early next week in relation to the exam, but we know when it's happening. You have your starter code. So I will set up an entry on Moodle where you will upload just a text file again containing the URL of your GitHub repo where the repo will contain essentially a copy of my starter code. And do make sure that you can push to your repo and make sure you can deploy the starter code to your account. And I will remind you the morning or the day before of the actual exam to have your stack deployed before the exam, just to save a little bit of time, because the deployment can take a few minutes, especially for the seeding of the database. It can slow things up a little bit. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any questions, so I will leave it at that, and I will be in touch with you again early next week. Thanks.